Say hello. Everybody have your cafecito?
Yes.
Okay, good. When someone gives me a cue, I'm happy to start. To everyone who's online, hello, hello, hello. I see you, not really, but I know you're there. Vamos? Who's going to give me the signal to go? Am I going to give it to myself? Vamos? Vamos? Okay, buenos dias, good morning, buongiorno, good morning, bon dia. My name is Ana Ceppi, and I am honored to be here today to kick off Cafecito. Cafecito con HACE is a weekly, monthly series where the leadership at HACE has an opportunity to bring forward those individuals who are on that trajectory for growth. We know that as a community, we don't see each other as frequently in leadership positions as we would like. And so Cafecito is an opportunity to tell our stories of success, to tell our stories of endurance, and to tell our stories so others can see us represented. If you are a leader and you're interested in participating in Cafecito, please reach out to Patricia Mota. I'm going to do a lot of call-outs to her, or the team, or myself, because we know that when we see each other, we know that we are in the right trajectory. I'm a fractional CMO for HACE. It's such a pleasure to be here. And on my other hustle, I am a co-founder of a company called Multicultural Growth Partners. And so what we do is we go into the data, which I will show you some today, and we build a business case as to why this marketplace and this community is essential. So beyond the values conversation that we have in these rooms, value conversation that also needs to be coupled with it. So it's my pleasure to move forward. If you have any questions, just please hold them to the end. Our theme is uniting voices and empowering communities, particularly in these times. Together, we're stronger, and so we need to make sure that we behave in that way and that we come forward in that way. Housekeeping notes. We are filming. If you do not want to be part of the film, please sit in the back. I speak loudly enough so you can hear me. And we're also photographing, so we're giving an opt-out option if you want to be back there. And if you want pictures with me later, I'll meet you outside. And the second thing is that at HACE, we believe that diverse perspectives need to be respected. What does that mean? In this room, everyone's voice matters with equal respect. We want to make sure that you are heard with respect. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, good. So Summit has started. Yay. Some of the team have been working so hard to this day and tomorrow. Thank you to the team. Thank you for you to making time and space to do this. Here we go for a hard cafecito. Hold on, there's a lot of data coming. So the first thing that we like to talk about in my universe, is that the diverse consumer and community is not an option. It is the only positive driver of growth in this country. And it continues to be a change agent. And we're doing it quietly, and people are not really paying attention, but the facts are very real that this landscape will continue to be driven by people like you in this room because of demographics and because of the power of the purse. Let's talk about demographics. Currently, the population splits in this way. 58% is white, 19% is black, 19% is Hispanic, 12% is black, AAPI is about 6%. And then those people that like to fill the census with there's some other race, which I respect, I could do that in many other places, is 6%. But when we look a couple years down the road, the white population will stop being 50% or 58%, and it will become 49%. The Hispanic population will be 25%, almost 26%. that Black population will continue to grow and the AAPI population will continue to grow. So there is a shift afoot. If you live in a state, largest demographic group is the multicultural group. So while we all believe that this is just happening in New York or in California or in Texas, news for you, it's happening everywhere. The deeper the green from 2010 to 2020, the more diverse populations are there. I always ask in rooms like this for people who are younger than me, what percentage of the population they think is diverse, and almost always they say 50 or 70%. For those of us who are a little bit further upstream in the age demographic, it's usually 5 to 6%. This growth is happening everywhere. So it is closer to that sentiment of 50%. Newsflash, in 1 year, by the year of the World Cup, is the majority will be minority in the age group of 18 to 24. By the time the Olympics are happening in LA, it will be 18 to 34. And then 18 to 49, which is how all media and products and services are developed, will be in 8 years' time. What tells you is that 46% of the consumer today is multicultural. I stopped that on purpose. 46% of the consumer today is multicultural. 100%. Without this consumer, the business transformation that's happening, the education transformation that's happening, it would not be occurring. And we have a perception problem, right? Estimated perception problem. And the reason why Patricia kindly asked me to come here to debunk power. That's a lot of money. When we break it down by community, you know, the Black Americans are bringing 1.8 trillion to the GDP, AAPI 1.8 trillion. They're punching well above their weight for the money that they're bringing forward, and the Hispanic is bringing 3.8 trillion. When it comes to spending, which is where most of us should really consider the power of the wallet, the Black Americans is 2.1 trillion, AAPI is 2.4 trillion, and the Hispanic population, 4.2 trillion. That's a lot of wallet. Then we look at where are we fueling the economy. We know small businesses are growing. We know more houses are being bought by Latinos. We know that there's more education acquisition happening, and the buying power continues to grow. But then we look at categories. I see the room. How much beauty money are we spending? A lot. How much are we eating? A lot. How many people have new cars? A lot. And pets? Unbelievable. So if you don't see from the macro level, you're living it. You need to know that that value and that seat that you're bringing forward in your organization has a lot of acquisitive power. When we look at education, again, this talent pipeline, where we are, where we're going, the college numbers are really good, really interesting across the board. When you look at STEM, when you look at MBAs, at law school and medical school, that's where the jam is really going to pivot, at those executive leadership positions. So our premise is that multicultural market is not an if, it's a when. Any questions? Great. So I'm going to hand it over to Patricia to have a proper cafecito in real life time. And thank you for your time.
Please join me in thank you. Thank you, Ana. Amazing. And so we want to now have a conversation with two wonderful leaders that are joining us here this morning that graciously said yes to really have a conversation, Cafecito con HACE charla, to kick us off for this summit. And so I'll ask my dear colleagues, Karen Freeman-Wilson, Executive Director of the Chicago Urban League, and Linda Ataguana, to the President and CEO of Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics to please join me on the stage. Welcome. All right. Bien, bien. So these ladies I look up to, and we get to chat every now and then and just, share advice and best practice, and especially today. I think more than ever, so a little bit of the silver lining with everything that's happening in this age is a lot of the collective conversations that are happening, because part of the theme of this summit is que, juntos we rise, together we rise, and we truly believe that, and looking at every way possible that we can continue to double down on that. So given the data, I'm gonna throw the question to you all first. What's one word that comes to mind when you're looking at all of the data from our communities? Power. Opportunity. Growth. Those of you on the live stream, please throw them in the chat. We want to hear. So we hear power, opportunity, growth. What else? You see the education and the increase. There's, for me, there's some pride, right? Exacto, right? So much there. With your leadership journey for our leaders joining us here, I want to kick us off with the conversation to, part of it is we lead with purpose, and we need tools and data, right, to help us as we lead with that. Connecting these facts to your leadership and your purpose, tell us a little bit about who you are and why and how you define leading with purpose. Linda, do you want to start? Okay. Welcome. Welcome.
Okay. All right. This is on. This is great. I don't have to turn it on myself. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for having me here, and thank you for inviting me and to be part of this conversation with you. And I think this also reflects just, in this time, it's better for all of us to come together and find ways and keep moving forward, and to remind, I think all of our communities that together we're stronger. Yeah. And so thank you for having me. I'm thinking about the data that was just shown, and it just makes me think, I will tell you, okay, I think right now we live in a world where people are either like blue or red, right? That seems to be how people are identifying nowadays, more so than ever. But I'm also reminding myself that ultimately there's only one color that really matters. That's green, right? And that the numbers that were just shown just really is what I think, proves it. And I think we have to remind ourselves. The other thought that was going through my mind is, can you imagine the U.S. economy trying to divest itself of all of us, like all of our communities? And that's just not going to be possible. And I know that there's these kind of days without, right? And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But I think we're so integral to just the way this society and this community and this, economy. I think it's just going to be, it's just almost unimaginable. And I think that's what we have to remind ourselves. So as I think about, leading with purpose, I just have to remind myself about that we have a place, we are here, we belong, or we have to make sure that we remind other people that we belong. And sometimes I think it's also about reminding ourselves too, because, as you ask about who am I, thought about what am I going to say. So I'll share that I am a child of immigrants. My parents were from Japan, and they came during a time which was just after World War II. So my family's story as a Japanese American, it's not one of the internment camps, as if you're familiar with that. It's more of a post-World War II kind of Japanese American upbringing that did not have that. But my parents were survivors of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, so it's a different kind of understanding of the world. I was the first, believe it or not, I was the first in my family to actually get a 4-year college degree. My parents did not, neither did my grandparents. I think they maybe didn't even finish high school. I never asked them that, and I regret that I never did. So there are things that, people, when they see me, they assume certain things about me because of, just my race, but there are also things that are not necessarily true. I grew up in a neighborhood which we still, my dad just recently passed last year, and so the house is still there, so I've been spending a lot of time there. And it just reminds me of just, the neighborhood that I grew up in, and it's a pretty different neighborhood. It was a working class neighborhood, still kind of is. The people that were around me were predominantly either working class white or Latinos, and we were the only Asian family in the area. And so my perspective is, I think, informed by all of that in terms of, equity, fairness, inclusion, belonging, diversity. These are all things that I live with and I think about in terms of like the decisions that I make, the reasons why I do the work that I do. And so, yeah, so that's who I am.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. And Linda, a little bit, if you all are not familiar with LEAP, do a lot of great work, and similar to HACE, focused on the community as well. And so just a resource for you all as well. And Karen, please share with us a little bit about your story.
So first and foremost, good morning, buenos tardes, or buenos dias.
There you go.
Buenos dias.
Got it.
I wanted to first thank Patricia for the opportunity to be here with two amazing women, but also for your leadership and your leadership across all of the lines in a time like this. I agree with Linda. This is so critical now.
Yeah.
And when I think about your question in the context of my leadership journey, and look at the presentation, which was amazing. Some of the statistics and data surprised me. Some of it did not. I think about the fact that I joined the Urban League 5 years ago after leading the city of Gary as mayor. And prior to that, I was a judge and the Attorney General for Indiana. And in each of those positions, I was a first. But I think about my daughter's generation. She's 31. And the real opportunity, because I heard people talk about opportunity, is that her generation doesn't have to be the first. And I think that our role is to really ensure, I always felt this way when I was in those positions, that I keep the door open so that I am not the only, so that I am not the first. In this current environment, it's a little more difficult. But what we see from that, and it's evident also in our work with 2/3 United here in Chicago, is that we are stronger together. And the thing that I would say is that we have to resist the effort to divide us. Whether you're talking about the Harvard-UNC case, or whether you're just talking about this concept of there's a set aside for people of color to do business, to do this, to do that. I'm like, well, forget the 20%, I'm looking at the 80. Or forget the 10%, I'm looking at the 90. Because if you look at the data, we justify that opportunity. And so I think it's really opportunity and power and recognition of what we bring to the table, the green.
Yeah. The power of the purse, and Ana talked about this, and which is why we wanted to open up with the data, because it's part of the toolkit that we need to leverage, right, in our work and in our roles. I know we've got that are leading your resource groups, are involved with the community, and are advocating to do more in your respective roles. But also as it pertains to your own personal career trajectory, I think it's important to understand how are you making that. And we talked a lot your purpose, and here we are in a time and space. We talked about some of the challenges, right? The climate, there's has been in a time and space where whether you're calling it now diversity, equity, and inclusion, people and culture, or whatever it is, right? And we understand, and we've seen the news in terms of the anti-DI rhetoric and how it's been weaponized with this administration. At the end of the day, our priority with the mission of the work that we're doing is how do we ensure that the intention behind what it is intended to do continues to happen, and that we are working collectively to ensure that within our respective organizations, with the employers, the companies that we're working with, that we're holding them accountable to ensure that the work still happens, and being innovative and creative about how that comes about. Because inevitably, we've seen it with affirmative action in higher education, that the gaps widen, right? When the rollbacks happened, you saw that MIT, for example, went from having 15% Black, Latino, Native students to 5% as a result. The gaps are currently happening in the workforce because of, we're in a holding period, we have legal reviewing, but what can be done in the interim, and how can we get creatively to get faster, to get the intention to ensure we're bringing in talent representative of all communities, that we're advancing and cultivating talent representative of all communities, and providing for everyone. And so what are some actionable strategies that, perhaps how do you define diversity, equity, inclusion? How have we gotten it wrong? Because it hasn't been done right, but there's also been some good. And how do we push forward the intent innovatively, creatively, in your roles?
So I'll start on that. What I would say, and what we are encouraging folks to do, is look at different talent pools, whether you are recruiting for a college or whether you are recruiting for a job. If you look in a place where people look the same way, then you're going to find the same people. But if you look in different places, so maybe you don't just recruit at U of I, you should also recruit at Chicago State or Northern Illinois. Maybe you aren't just looking at programs on the north side when you're looking for people to work. You're looking for programs all over the city. And if you look in different places, then you will get a wide array of candidates. And here's what we know, back to the power of the purse. When you have diverse workforces, when you have diverse talent pools, you have a better end product. You deliver a better product. And if people recognize that, and if they're truly looking to benefit shareholders and get to the best bottom line, then they'll cut against those traditional biases. You know, the laws that folks are trying to roll back, and the history that people are trying to deny, that didn't happen in a vacuum. Like, you know, people were intentional about discriminating. I mean, they worked hard at it. It's like, you know, when people talk about the devil, he is good at his job. People were good at discriminating. And so we are simply saying you have to be equally as committed to ensuring that everyone has an opportunity.
Yeah, it takes intention and being able to advocate for that and ask the questions, right? If you're in a space where perhaps they are going to the same places, and being able to say, hey, can we consider, and this is why. Linda, what would you add?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Karen just said. I think, you know, regardless of the, like you said, right, regardless of the terms, and I would say, I've been around long enough to see the evolution of the terms, right? We've seen them all. But, you know, I think you asked the right question, right? What's the intent behind the acronym, or even just the words? And I believe the intent is really, you know, creating places where everyone who's in an organization can feel like they are included, and that they can belong. And I think ultimately, you know, what then that has to be is really going to have to be according to the way, you know, those leaders of the companies that, you know, are running their companies really want to really enact that kind of intent, right, of inclusion and belonging, and just understanding that, you know, I love what you said about, like, the devil was really like working hard. I mean, you do have to work hard to discriminate, but I think it's equally true that you have to work hard to be inclusive and to ensure that people belong. That is hard work. And, you know, when you ask, like, what's been done wrong, honestly, you know, I think we're all human, and sometimes we get a little lazy and we try to just kind of do things quick and maybe a little easier, but then it leads to some of the misunderstandings. I think we just have to remind ourselves, you know, this is not something where we're going to get quick wins, and just, you know, being okay that sometimes having those little wins, the baby steps, is going to have to work and is going to have to be okay. Because if we lose sight of that, then we're going to be so discouraged that we're just going to give up and we're just going to let things happen the way they are. And I think I'm just going to call them, it's those little accidents that we have to remind ourselves we have to keep working at every single day. You know, we're all in our workplaces, right? We as leaders, you want people who are going to be doing their best. And I think we have to really just keep challenging. Why are we making these decisions, right? The data that you showed, there's other data. And I know that right now the movement is to not collect certain kinds of data, but come on. What company doesn't collect data on everybody and everything? And they're going to not collect data on their employees? I have a really hard time believing that. Because how else are you going to know what you're doing? How are you making progress in terms of getting the most out of your talent? And so you got to know who's in your talent pool. You know, what are you going to do to make sure that, you know, people are getting those kind of opportunities to really give their best? If you don't know enough, I don't understand. I wouldn't know a leader who probably, you know, would say we don't need that kind of information. I would find that really hard to believe. And I think we got to keep reminding people, you know, the data does matter, and that we got to keep reminding people that, you know what, if we don't know this, then we can't do better, and we can't be more inclusive, and we can't ensure that people belong.
Yeah, and the data's out there. I know the one you referenced, Karen, on, you know, more diverse teams, more productive, better business outcomes like McKinsey, and there's other data points that are out there. And so definitely leveraging the data. And there's nothing unlawful, and I'm not a lawyer, an attorney, but there's nothing unlawful about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think and then, or collecting the data, I think there's nuances, and please refer to an attorney when you ask about it. But I do think that sometimes there's more conservative in terms of and the majority you have seen, right, in the media, the companies have said, and they're no longer doing the work, those that are rolling back the work. But the truth of the matter, the majority are in between. And the majority are still doing the work. It's just looking different. It's just the messaging is different. And it's about, I mean, you all are here, right? And so we're grateful for your companies and your organizations. And so it's just going to take some pause, some time, some evolution. But I truly believe, right, that having these collective conversations and ensuring that we're moving the needle together. Our last question, because we want you all to consider and to reflect on your own in terms of the action, right? Not just today as you're going and meeting with one another and going through the sessions, but from here on out, is what, you know, we want to be able to provide some strategies for folks here as they're engaging, but also within their respective companies, that perhaps if they're an individual contributor or they are in the DEI space, that you would recommend that they can continue to move forward the change in this work, in this space.
I guess I'm going to add, you know, there was once upon a time where everything about DEI was about the business case, and then it became more about the moral imperative, and I think we're back to the business case. I think you should be thinking about, you know, how are you, and how can you leverage your knowledge about diverse communities to help move that business case for your company. Because again, it goes back to that green, right? If you're showing that under consumer base and the different nuances of the consumers that your company is serving, and you have ideas in which you could tap into it so that you could actually then increase profitability, bring in more revenue, those are the kind of things that I think are going to be, the kind of actionable things that are going to remind people why, whether it's DEI or any other word that's being used inside your companies is important still.
I would also add, because I totally agree with Linda, the other thing we want to do is make sure that as hard as people work in trying to erase history and, disaggregate the data and keep us in the dark about the information, we have to take it upon ourselves to provide that history, to provide that information. So for every book that they take out, we need to make sure our young people understand the history. For every piece of data that they say we don't need to collect, we need to collect it ourselves. The Urban League has a research and policy center. We understand that our mission there is now more important than ever because we need to collect the data that we've been counting on the census or the federal government or some other private entity to collect. So I think that's where we can be helpful, really getting information like the data that we heard this morning out.
Yeah, and part of us being here is knowledge sharing, right? So, and the information that's going to be shared throughout the next 2 days. So how many of you, well, I'll ask you, since we're also here for your own knowledge and leadership development, how many of you are leading or part of an ERG, Employee Resource Group, Business Resource Group? So I want to make sure you look around the room and connect with one another, right? Because you all are also here to share resources and to network. I know we've got some coaches and career coaches that are going to be part of our coaching corner that are going to be offering advice. So please raise your hand. Make sure you know who these individuals are. I know we have some folks here. Come on, con más orgullo. I need you guys to make sure that you guys are also connecting, tapping into one another for resources, for advice. Any community, organization, leaders, and nonprofits. So we've got some folks here. All right. Making sure you guys connect, network, and then tell your partner, someone what's one leadership capability or trait or something that you're wanting to work on in the next 2 days. Share it with your partner if you want to shout it out loud. Or drop it in the chat. I know we've got some folks that are joining. Collaboration. So I want to hear you say 2-3 things out loud that you all heard. I heard collaboration, networking, I'm sorry? Patience, okay. A lot of deep breathing. I've been doing a lot of deep breathing. Collaboration, networking, knowledge. All right, one last piece of advice on anything that they shared that you heard for our group.
I would just say, go to a stranger and introduce yourselves. So often we come to conferences, we sit with our colleagues or people we know, and I know that makes you feel comfortable, but, take it from somebody who's run for office before, having people not vote for you or not be friendly or not, is not a life-ending experience. You just go to the next person and you'll find somebody else.
I love it. Linda?
I'm just going to say, I think take inspiration from each other. The fact that you're all here is just, it's amazing, and it's so great to see. And so many of you are from ERGs. Just celebrate and just really take that inspiration together. And hopefully that can keep you going because, we have interesting times ahead.
Interesting times indeed, and I think it's even more critical than ever that you're here, you're coming together, you're in community. As Karen mentioned, is talk to someone that you haven't met, making sure. I think everyone here is in the spirit of networking, and so making sure we keep the smiles going. There's coffee nonstop throughout the next 2 days, so lots of cafecito. Really wants to make sure that you're getting your cafe on, and ensuring that we're exchanging. So whether you have your LinkedIn QR code or some sort of communication, you want to make sure you have that method to be able to exchange and network. And we're just here to send you off and to thank you and hopefully put a couple things in your mind in terms of the data, in terms of great organizations that are represented here that are also here to support you and collaborating and connecting with one another. So bienvenidos a todos that are here in person, that are joining us in the live stream. You've got about 15 minutes for your next session, so you have time to network, to connect, grab some more cafe, and to join the first session for the day. So thank you. Please join me in thanking our speakers here today.